going to start off doing an exercise, and if you look on your sheet here, you have exercise 1, and again, it has different things on here that we engage in on a regular basis, like sleep, internet, time with God, friends, things of that nature. So this exercise is kind of twofold. The first part is what I want you to do is if you look on your list, you'll see that you have the word and you have a line to the right of the word and to the left of the word. So on the shorter line to the left of the word, if you'll write on a scale of 1 to 10 how important this activity is to you. So on the shorter line, you're going to write on a scale of 1 to 10 how important each activity is to you. And then again, on those 3 slots there on the bottom, feel free to write in anything that's not on this list that you feel is specific to your life, something that you engage in on a regular basis that's significant and important for you. And then as you're doing that, on the other line to the right of the word, if you'll write down on average or on a typical day, how many hours in a typical day do you think you spend on whatever activity you have there? So to the left, you're going to have on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this activity to you? And then on the right-hand side, you're going to write on an average, in a particular day, on a typical day, how many hours do you think that you spend on each activity? Do it for a day. How many hours do you think in a day? And it doesn't have to be exact, just a rough estimate. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the first part of it. So what are some of the things that we listed as being the most important to us? Go ahead and shout them out. Time with God. Is it work? Family? Church? Okay. So looking at the other side, where are we spending the most of our time? Work, sleep. Work and sleep. School, phone. Okay. So what we should see when we look at this is, kind of like a chart or a graph, if you will, that on the one hand, the things that we deem most important to us should be the areas where we're spending the most of our time. But as we'll see on here, specifically the one that I want to talk about is time with God. How many of you put that it was pretty significant and pretty important to you in a regular basis, right? And then how many, I won't ask you how much time you're spending, but if you look at, your relationship with God, we feel like it's something that's very important to us. We know that it's important to us, but for whatever reason or not, that relationship doesn't really happen because we're not spending as much time with it. So everything else is important to us and we're investing a lot of time in it, but with our relationship with God, we don't always see it that way. So kind of keep that in mind as we go about our conversation for today. So we're talking about being intentional with spending time with God and really growing intentionally and purposefully in our relationship with Him. And when we look at the word intentional, we know that when you do something with intent, you're doing it with purpose. There's a design behind it. You've designated a time, an area, you scheduled it in. There's something that you're doing, whatever you're doing, you deem it important enough that you set aside time or you specified how important this activity is to you. And when we look at being intentional with God, not only are we planning or designating a time to spend with Him, but we're recognizing the importance of our fellowship with Him and growing our relationship with Him. But when we become unintentional in our relationship with God, and when we find that we're not spending as much time with Him as we want to, it's not so much that we don't understand the importance of it, or we don't recognize the importance of it, or even that we don't want to spend time with God. It's just for whatever reason, other things tend to get in the way. So I want to turn to Luke chapter 10, and I want to talk a little bit about the story of Mary and Martha. And I know that this is one that we're all familiar with. So we're going to be in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. And this is one of those stories that we've all heard. I'm sure some of you may have read the book, Having a Mary Heart in a Martha World. But I really want to delve into this as it pertains to being intentional, spending time with God, and really kind of talk about what we can take away from this story and how each of us can relate to this. So Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. Now it happened as they went that he entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, tell her to help me. And Jesus answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things. But one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her. So I love this story because I feel like in any given day, in any given situation, we can find ourselves being both a Mary and being a Martha. But I want to look at Martha. So we see here that Jesus comes to town and he goes to Martha's house, and she's busy serving, doing what is the custom for women to do at that time. So she's serving, she's going about her business, she's doing what she's supposed to do. So she looks up, and her sister Mary, who was supposed to be helping her, is not. She's sitting down at Jesus' feet. And so Martha gets kind of upset. She says, Jesus, can you tell her to come help me? She's not doing what she's supposed to do. So one of the things that I love about this story that I think often gets overlooked, Martha was in the business of serving God. It wasn't so much that she was just doing what she was supposed to do, but she was busy serving God. She was excited about him being in her home. She wanted him to feel welcome. She wanted to be a hostess. She wanted to do everything that she was supposed to do, and so she was busy doing that. And there's nothing wrong with serving God, of course, but she got so caught up in the idea of serving God that she left out the part or overlooked the idea of sitting at his feet. And I think that happens to us on a regular basis as we get so busy or so caught up with the idea of I'm going to be the best wife, the best mother, the best friend, the best, whoever would have you. I'm going to be the best at whatever role I'm in so that I can serve God through that. But then we overlook the idea that we can't truly serve God if we're not spending time with him. So those two things go hand in hand. You can't serve God without making sure that you're taking that time to sit at his feet. The second thing that we can kind of get from the story, and if I read this and I kind of put myself in Martha's shoes, is that I can imagine that as she's serving, maybe while she's going around the room and she's serving everyone and she's doing her thing, but maybe she lingers a little bit while she's in the room. It's not like she too doesn't want to sit at Jesus' feet and hear everything that he has to say. So I can kind of imagine her taking her time and being kind of intentional, if you will, about slowly, doing what she's supposed to do and making sure everybody has something to eat and something to drink. And maybe she takes her time leaving out of the room because she too wants to hear whatever it is that he's saying. And I feel like, Martha, as she's going about her day and as she's going throughout this scenario, that she's grabbing these bits and pieces of the conversation, and she's grabbing bits and pieces of what it is that Jesus and the disciples and everyone are talking about, and she's holding on to those as if that's kind of enough to sustain her. And I think that we get caught up in this same thing too on a regular basis, and I feel like technology makes it really easy for us to do that. If you think about, if you follow like T.D. Jakes or Joyce Meyer or somebody online, and you can pause throughout your day and go through Twitter or Instagram or Facebook and grab little snippets, maybe if you have 5 or 10 minutes, you can read an inspirational blog or something, but that's not enough to sustain you in your walk with God, and it's certainly not enough to help you build that relationship with God. So again, it kind of goes back to the idea that we have to sit down and be quiet at his feet and shut everything else out, even those things that are important, even those things that need to be done, because there's no way that we can be teachers and educators, and there's no way that we can do anything that we're supposed to do to help someone else if we're not first taking that time to really sit at God's feet and hear what it is that he has for us to say and build that relationship with him. So I want to talk a little bit about relationships, and if you've read any of the blogs that we've had on IamPursued.org, you notice for the past couple of weeks we've been talking about the whole idea of really falling in love with God and really building that loving relationship with him. I liken it to, every time, I'm home for the holidays, every time my dad would walk through the room, my mom would just stop and I'm just in love with your daddy. Your daddy this and your daddy that. And every time that he would pass through the room, every time he did something, it's like she fell in love with him all over again. And I feel like we have to get back to that place in our relationship with God, that it's not enough to just fall in love with him once, that every day we should fall in love with him with every experience, with every prayer, with every worship moment. We should continue to fall in love with God. So, talking about relationships, we know that throughout the course of our life, and even right now, we'll find ourselves in different types of relationships. You have a parent-child relationship, you have a relationship with your spouse or your significant other, you have your best friends, you have your coworkers, you have all of these different relationships. And depending on what kind of relationship you're in, it's going to require a different level of intimacy. The level of intimacy that you share with a coworker is certainly not going to be, you're not going to tell them all your secrets like you would your best friend. So the relationship that you're in is going to determine how intimate you are with someone. So I ask you, and this isn't something that you have to answer today, but it's just something to kind of chew on is, how intimate are you really with God? We all say, well, God knows my heart, and God knows, what I think and what I feel and what I want and what I need. But that's never an excuse to not be intimate with him and to not share those experiences with him. So I want to pose a question to you on, and we can have a little discussion about it, but what are some things that make a relationship successful? And this is not just a romantic relationship, but relationship with your coworkers, your friends, your boss. What are some things that make a relationship successful? Honesty. Communication. Vulnerability. Yeah, I know. Anybody else? Accountability. Okay. Good stuff. All right. So I want to talk about 4 key things that every relationship needs. And these 4 things, I want to kind of call them like little cornerstones, so to speak, and they all build upon each other. And they're all things, again, that no matter what kind of relationship you're looking at, these are 4 things that every relationship needs. So the first thing is communication. Now, it's impossible to even start a relationship without communication. In order to begin a relationship with someone, there's some sort of communication that has to take place. So communication is the starting point of any relationship, and it's going to be that thread that keeps the relationship going. You can't be in a friendship, you can't work with someone, you can't be married to someone and not have communication throughout the course of that relationship. So relationship is the beginning of it, or communication is the beginning of a relationship, and it's also the glue that holds that relationship together. Now, when we're talking about communication, it's important to realize that communication can be verbal and nonverbal. And so often we think about communicating with God, I think we think about it through prayer and through praise and worship and things like that. But there are also some nonverbal ways that we can communicate with God. If you look at your actions, it's one thing to believe in God and to believe what the Word says and to, think and think the way that God would have you to think, or even say the things that God would have you to say. But if your actions aren't backing up that Christian lifestyle, if your actions aren't reflective of God and the life that He has for you and the things that He wants from you, then are you, what does that say about your relationship with God? you can't say one thing and then do something else and say that you have a bona fide relationship with God. Those two things, your verbal communication with Him and your nonverbal communication with Him, have to go hand in hand. So the first thing that every relationship needs is communication. The second thing that every relationship needs is honesty. So when we're talking about honesty, we're talking about being transparent. And this goes back to what I said before, I think we've gotten so used to the idea that, God knows my heart and I don't have to tell Him everything because He knows what I think before I say it or before I think it. He just knows me so well. But the whole act of repentance and the whole act of being vulnerable with God and really talking through your sins and talking through what's on your heart and talking through everything that you're going through, that's honesty and that's transparency. And when you think about it in your friendship, in your relationships, you want someone to be that honest and to be that vulnerable with you, and we can do the exact same thing with God. So the first two things that every relationship needs are communication and honesty. Then the third thing that every relationship needs is an investment. Now, this investment can come in the shape of time, energy, or resources. Now, the beauty of these three types of investment, time, energy, and resources, is that, when you invest energy in anything, in any relationship or in any kind of activity, you can get your energy back. You invest your resources in someone or into something, you can get your resources back. But when you invest time in someone or when you invest time in something, you can't get time back. Time is the only thing that once it's gone, it's gone. And that's why when we get out of relationships, we get so upset and we're like, man, I wasted 2 years with you, and you can't get that time back. That's why it's so important to really understand time. And when you think about spending time with God, it's time. I think that's what holds a lot of people back from really investing time with God, because they say, well, there's other things that need my time as well. But again, there's no way that you can be who God's called you to be. There's no way that you can be the best woman, the best wife, the best mother, the best teacher, the best student, the best anything, if you're not first sitting before God and investing time in Him. And then the fourth thing that every relationship needs is consistency. And this is something that we can certainly see in our relationship with God. We know that God is a faithful God, and thankfully His faithfulness is not, contingent on us being faithful or not. He will always be faithful. And so it's important that we respect that and we honor that by being consistent in spending time with Him and by being faithful and investing in our relationship with Him. So if you look back on your handout here, I want to look at exercise 2. And you see that you have 5 slots there. So I want you to take a minute and write down the 5 most important relationships in your life today, right now, at this very moment. The 5 most important relationships in your life. If you don't have 5, it's okay. All right. So let's take a minute and talk about, we have 5 most important relationships in our life. So who wants to share a little bit about how are you currently investing in those relationships? It doesn't have to be in the form of time, energy, or resources, but just how are you investing in that relationship? How are you working to keep that relationship going?
You want all of them?
You can just pick whichever one.
Okay, I can do God, and I spend quiet time with Him. When I wake up, I spend some time, and then when I get in my classroom, I spend time. I get there like 30 minutes earlier, and I just, pray and touch the desk and everything. Because I can tell when I forget
Right.
and not touch the desk or don't pray, and the kids are all crazy.
Right.
And then before I go to sleep, I like to have that quiet time with Him to wind down, because it's very stressful,
Right.
everything. And then I think it's very important to have a good relationship
watch her shows with her and get just as invested with her about her shows, so she'll have somebody that she can talk to about it and everything. So that's really I've realized now that like I am a huge Doctor Who fan from the BBC because of her,
Right.
so that she can have somebody to talk to. So
That's cool. Anybody else want more? Yeah.
I actually put myself, just because I think that, you know, obviously it's important. I can't begin to give or pour into somebody else if I'm not right within, you
Right.
know? So I try to take a lot of time to work on me, to reflect on, you know, different, situations, past relationships, and see, I mean, obviously, it's easier to blame other people for things that went wrong in past relationships, but then you also have to hold yourself accountable. So in doing that, I try to find out what I can work on, to kind of change the outcome for, you know, the future relationships with other people.
Good. So, how would you feel, and this might not apply, you know, to what you said about, you know, yourself, but how would you feel if your sister or if your students or if anybody that you put on your list of top five and most important relationships in your life, but how would you feel if those people did not respond to your investments? Like, how would you feel if you were watching the BBC with your sister and she was just like, I don't care?
it's like actually really funny you said that. Okay, then I recorded an episode of Doctor Who for her, like in November, and she was like, "Yeah, I'll get over there." And I'm like, "Look, I'm not gonna erase all this junk. I'm like, it's gonna be gone."
Right.
And so last night she was like, "No way." So yeah, it would definitely. I was irritated. I was really irritated that I had invested this time. Like you said, I wasn't gonna get that back. And then like my DVR sent me that message where it's like, "Yeah, you can write your space." And I'm like, "Yeah, something's about to get ready."
Yeah.
So.
Okay, anybody else? So how would you feel if you're investing in someone and you don't get it back?
Frustrated and mentally drained.
Frustrated and drained. Yeah. Right.
Listen, I feel very frustrated.
Right. So how do we think that God would feel sometimes when we don't respond to the investments that He's making in our life? Like when we overlook the things that He's doing, maybe we're expecting Him or we're asking Him to do something over here, He does something over here and it's for our good, but we're looking over this way. So how do we feel that makes God feel when we ignore His deposits in our life or His investments?
Well, it's kind of like you said, like, you know, can I trust you with the little?
Right.
You know, and it's like, if I can trust you with this small portion that I'm giving you, then I can trust you with some more big deposits, as you say. Because we can't trust you with the small deposit, and you're overlooking that, then, you know, it's gonna take some time. He's still gonna give you what you desire, but he's gonna see how you're going to treat the small things that he's giving you first.
That's very good. Yes.
I like to think that if we are created in His image, then the feelings that we have are feelings that He's experiencing. So if you, like a mother and a child, if your child is going a certain way in life, or that's, you know, not pleasing, or they get hurt, you're distraught on the inside because you don't want that for your child. You don't want to see them in pain or going through what they're going through. So that's the same thing with God and us. If He sees us doing things that's unpleasing, going a direction that we shouldn't be going in, He's going to feel that. He's going to be wanting his child to be on the right track. So I feel like any emotion we experience comes from Him, so He experiences them too, the same way we do. We just don't tend to think about that because we're like, oh, that's God, and He's just on this and all this, but we get our feelings from Him, so He feels it just as much as we may feel it with someone in the natural.
Very good. Anybody else? All right, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to go over some tips that we can take with us for being intentional. And I do have a little bit of homework for you ladies. I don't know if you saw that at the bottom. I tried to sneak it in there so you wouldn't see it, but you know. All right, so some of the tips that I have for being intentional are figure out when you're at your best, what time of day you're at your best, be this morning, noon, or night, and schedule time with God during that time. Like I know for me, I'm at my best like 45 minutes to an hour after I wake up in the morning, after I've kind of shaken everything off. Then I'm kind of ready to go and I can focus. I'm a morning person, so I do really good in the morning. So I make sure that my mornings are centered around the fact that I have to have time with God. So the second thing is, once you figure out what time of day is best for you, schedule a time for God then, and then don't schedule once you have that time in there, don't schedule your time with God around your schedule. Don't arrange your time with God around everything else that you have going on, but arrange everything else that you have going on around your time with God. Like if you know that you have to be at work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, you're not going to schedule something at 2 o'clock because you can't be there. So you're going to first schedule your time with God, schedule that in there, make that date, and then schedule everything else around that. And sometimes it might be easier than others. Maybe it's different times on different days, depending on how you feel. Maybe on the weekends you're able to sleep in a little bit, or maybe you can do it. But find a time that works best for you. One of the things that I think trips a lot of people up is that we feel like, the first time, or as soon as you get up, you have to go straight into spending time with God. And a lot of people, there's nothing wrong with that, but when a lot of people get into that, you wake up and you're half asleep, you hit the snooze button a couple times and you feel bad because you put the snooze on Jesus. It can kind of throw you off more than it can really help you. So that's why I say really find a time when you're awake, you're alert, you're at your peak, you're at your best, and schedule that time with God. And that doesn't mean that you can't have other times with Him throughout the day, but your primary time with Him should be when you're at the top of your game and you're really able to give Him the best of you. So the next thing is to start small and go bigger. One of the things as I was beginning, to really build my relationship with God is that I always felt like I had to spend like an hour with God a day. And so I would find myself, like sitting in my room with my Bible and my journal and, I have my worship music going, but I would just sit there for like an hour. I might read a little bit. Maybe I would get like 10 or 15 good minutes, but I had an hour to spend with God. I feel like I had to, but I wasn't really spending that time with Him. I was just kind of, okay, we're in the same space at the same time, but we're not really doing anything. So one of the things that I found is that if you start small and go bigger, you can build into that rather than feeling like I have to find a way to fill this hour with God, but you can really make the most of your time because you're starting smaller and going bigger. So if you have to start with 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the afternoon, and 5 minutes in the evening, if that works, then start there. And then that 5 minutes will build into 10 to 15 to 20. I think it's easier, and it's easier mentally if you look at it and say, okay, I'm going to spend this time with God, and then you go on about the rest of your day. Maybe you stop in the afternoon, you spend some more time, go on about your day, stop in the evening, spend some time, and go on about your day. And I think that He honors any sacrifice, be it a bigger sacrifice or a smaller sacrifice, but what He really wants is that quality time with you. And if quality time is 5 minutes rather than an hour where maybe you're just engaged for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, then I think He'll honor that as well. So start small and then go bigger from there. The next thing I have is kind of snacks versus meals. And we kind of talked about this a little bit more, is that, if you're growing up and your mom ever said, don't eat, you're going to spoil your appetite. One of the things that I found, and we did talk about this earlier, is that technology makes it so easier to get all these snacks of God or get all these tidbits of God. You can get 140 characters on Facebook or Twitter. You can get a picture on Instagram. And a lot of people will fill up on that, and that'll be their quiet time. That'll be their time with God. Or maybe you'll listen to, a 5-minute song. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, but that can't be all that you're getting. And sometimes you have to sit down with God, or all the time you have to sit down with God and get your own revelation with Him. It's not enough to live your life with God or to live your relationship with God based off what somebody else got. If Sherry comes to me and she tells me something that somebody else says, okay, wow, that's cool, but if I don't know that person, what does that mean? So until you really get to know God for yourself, you can't build a relationship with Him, a true relationship with Him, if you're living off snacks and you're not sitting down having a meal with God, having a meal still get snacks, but make sure that you're making time for meals with him as well. And then unplug. But turn off your phone, turn off your TV. One of the greatest inventions ever is the iPhone and that do not disturb option. And it took me, I think I had my iPhone for maybe like a year and a half before I ever used that iPhone feature, the do not disturb, because I always felt like somebody was going to call me and they were going to need me and it was going to be an emergency and I'd be the only person in the world that could help them with this. So I never turned it off. Sometimes you have to turn it off. And ever since I've been turning it off, nobody's died, nobody's needed me, and there's never been an emergency. And if there is an emergency, chances are you're calling the wrong one. But learn how to really unplug and really turn your phone off, turn your TV off, just be quiet before God. And even if you have to tell people, if you have roommates, if you have kids or husband, if you have to tell them, this is mom's time with God, this is my time with God, I'm closing the door, I'm turning everything off, unless you're like legitimately, this is an emergency, don't interrupt this time. And I think that'll help. I think that's why a lot of people really struggle, to have that time with God, because there's so many different distractions, but you really have to just turn everything off and make sure that you're setting aside that quality time and that bona fide time with Him. So those are just some tips that I have for being intentional. Does anybody else have anything that maybe they picked up over the course of their relationship with God that kind of helps them with being intentional, with really getting into that time with God?
I make it a point to vow at some point, get on my knees before God before I go to work. And I'm like the opposite of you, I'm not a morning person. So once I have my clothes on and I have in my right mind for the most part, then I have to go ahead and give God control of my day. And even if I don't have time at work to sit in prayer, if I'm stuck in traffic too long and I can't read my scripture before I walk in, I bow before Him and I'm giving Him that my sanity for the day. So I can find comfort in that when I'm in my workspace. And I think that's probably the most difficult part when you do have an 8-hour work day. You're just like, God, where do I fit you in? But it's possible. And finding that time at night to debrief with Him is also very important. So I think it is a bit of a ritual for me to do that, but it centers me and I feel like it brings me into His day.
That's good. Anybody else?
I don't want to drive too much, so that's really like my time. So, that helps me out.
Okay.
Like, so in your car, like she said, during like traffic jams and things like that, which is always like a really great time for me because I sometimes suffer road rage. So just like putting myself in that mindset where I do have my music playing, but I'm gonna just turn it down just so it has just like it comes back up and take that time like, okay, well God, we're gonna be on 51 for a minute, you and I. So that helps me.
Yeah.
Say this, I don't really know how it started, but I'm intentional about being in conversation with Him throughout my days, never just, and I do have those times where I'm saying, okay, let me get 10 minutes here, and then maybe I'll be on Facebook or something after, but I'm in constant conversation with Him, and I kind of believe that since the battlefield with Satan really is in your mind, and him trying to implant thoughts, the more you're speaking to the Lord, the less that Satan can come in.
Right.
And, you get implanted with some thought that takes you to the left into sin. If you're constantly talking to Him, and then if I feel some type of thought trying to come in that I know is not the Lord, then I'm able to recognize it immediately, rebuke Him, and keep on going with God.
That's good. Very good. Anyone else?
Piggyback off of what she just said, my schedule's really busy. I'm a full-time graduate student and I'm a mom, so I'm busy all the time. And like in the morning, I get up and when I first wake up, I just try to meditate on God. Like I just thank Him, Lord, I thank You that there's nothing that I can't face because I know that greater is He who's in me
Right.
and He who's in this world. get dressed, in the sundress, get in the car. But in the car, I'm always playing. I'm very mindful of what I listen to, because especially now that I'm a mom and
Right.
I have a son. So I'm always listening to word or just worship music in my car. And like now I'm on break, so I've literally unplugged. Like I have Netflix, I don't have cable, but I don't cut the TV on. Like I don't have my son on the weekend, so I don't cut the TV on at all. I just sit down and listen to Joe. I'm always listening to Joe or Joyce Meyer,
Right.
feeding my spirit. And then like when thoughts come into my head, I'm just like, oh, hold on. You know, I cast down demons, our arguments and pretension. Because sometimes it get I'm a single mom, so sometimes I'm not gonna say everything is all peaches and cream. I get lonely sometimes. I'm like, Lord, I'm feeling some type of way. I need you right now. Like,
Yeah.
I need you. So I just keep it real. And then I work out. I come here all the time. I work out all the time.
Okay.
And prior to, I like listening to crunk music. They say like when I work out. So, but I've noticed that what I listen to, it interferes with my spirit.
Right.
It's just the words, the message, basically. I like the beat, but the message. So I've made a constant effort that when I work out, I start listening to Joel and Joyce while I work out. And I've had great workouts.
Yeah.
And so far as everything's going as planned, but it just makes a difference because I'm constantly feeding my
Right.
spirit. And I just, like, I've come to a realization now, like, I know, like, this week I may be strong reading the word, but even if I miss a day, like, I got to constantly renew up here because
Right.
the battlefield is of the mind, and I just refuse to be defeated. So,
That's good. That's awesome. Very good. Anybody else?
I think it's discipline too,
Discipline.
because, you know, thinking back when I was younger and I was in school, you know, going out and stuff with your girls, you did everything to make sure you were there.
Right.
You know, you went, make sure you had your, hair appointment, your nails were done, you were on point to go out, you know, to the club, and it's like, I was giving the world my best.
Right.
You know, how can I not give God my best?
That's right.
And, you know, this is really good because it's reminding me of doing it intentionally. You know, I did that intentionally for
Right.
the world, so why can I not give God my ultimate best? You know, and take that out for him when I was giving the world 2.5, 3 hours in the club, you know, so that's what it reminds me of that too. And also what she said about talking to him throughout the day, you know, when little things come up, that's a blessing. I just say, you know, thank you, Jesus.
Right.
Thank you, Lord. And I move on. And then just little things, just giving him thanks throughout
Right.
the day, because if you wait till the night when I'm available, because I'm busy too, you know, you're forgetting, and you go to sleep and you're like, man, you know, look what God did yesterday. So
Right.
just throughout the day, giving him thanks and stuff like that really helps me out as well.
Okay. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, at the beginning, definitely having someone there to talk to, like an accountability partner, you know, your mom or someone else that, you know, knows the Lord and spends time with God and just getting like ideas from them on
Right.
how they do it, I think really helps you and helps you fit it into your schedule and figure out, you know, when is the best time to talk to God and how it works out for them. You know, it may not be for you, but, you know,
Right.
you just have someone there to talk about God with and just hold you accountable. Like me and my mom talk every day. It's like, you know, she'll like throw something in, like, oh, did you read today? Or, oh, did you go to Unplug? Or did you go, you know, Bible study today? You know, just things like that in the beginning really help you to get into like a rhythm of spending time with God.
That's good. All right, so I want to talk about our homework for the week, and then I'll go into our announcements that I have. So on your handout here on the bottom, you've got, did you get one? Yeah, okay. So on your handout here on the bottom, I've asked you to do 2 things. So the first thing is to pick 2 days out of the next week, one being the busiest day of your week, and then the second one being the least busiest day of your week. And really keep track of how much time you spend doing what. Now, in exercise 1, we just kind of estimated how much time we were doing on everything. But on the second one, on this one here for your homework, pick the busiest day and the least busiest day and really keep track of how much time you spend doing all of these different activities. And then you're going to answer the questions of 1, where is the bulk of my time being spent and why? And then 2, where it's the least amount of my time being spent and why. And then as you're doing this, just kind of keep in mind that time is the only thing that once it's gone, you can't get it back. So are there some areas of your life where you're giving too much attention that you can kind of back away from, and are there other areas of life that you're not giving enough attention that you could kind of share some more time that way? Then the second thing that I'd ask you to do is in your journal to make a T-chart. Does everybody know what I'm talking about with the T-chart? Yeah. So on one side, make a list of how you feel and how your day unfolds when you do spend time with God. And on the other hand, make a list of how you feel and how your day goes when you don't spend time with God. And I liken this to the Snickers commercials. They're like, hey man, eat a Snickers. Why? Because you're not you when you're hungry. Like, how are you when you don't spend time with God? So think about it like that as you're going through this exercise. And then kind of ask yourself, how are my relationships and interactions with others affected when I'm not spending time with God? So those are some things that I ask you to do throughout the next week or two. And then I do want to be sure that we go into our announcements, because one of the things that God has given me for Pursue for this year is just to expand what we do a little bit more. Since we started in June, we've pretty much just been doing our monthly Saturday meetings, but I really want to make sure that we're staying connected throughout the month and that we do offer some sort of accountability between all of us, myself included. So some of the things that we're going to start doing is we're going to do a Sunday night prayer call. It's going to be every Sunday night starting tomorrow at 9:30 p.m. and I'll post out and send out an email with all of the information. So if I don't have your information, then make sure that I get that today. But we're going to do a prayer call. It'll only be maybe 10 or 15 minutes, but part of the idea behind this is to pray about what's coming up in the coming week. If you have interviews, just to kind of set the stage on Sunday night for the rest of our week, and then to kind of be in prayer for each other as the week goes on. So we're going to do our Sunday night prayer calls. We're going to start doing monthly outings as well, in addition to this. So if you have any ideas of things that we could do, places that we could go, if anybody has birthdays coming up, then be sure to let me know, and we'll start doing our monthly outings. We're also going to be doing sporadically throughout the year, we're going to be doing little mini-series within each month. So I'll go ahead and tell you that for February, leading up to Valentine's Day, we're going to be doing our 14 Days of Love. And this will be online on our website. And so I'll make sure that everybody gets the information. But we're going to be talking about the 5 different love languages, all the different types of love, how to be a better lover, learning to love like Christ. So that's going to be our first series that we're going to be doing in February, in addition to our monthly Saturday meetings as well. And then we're going to start doing a weekly study. I want, part of being intentional, you think about it, if you're in a relationship, you have date night. And so I want us to legitimately have a date night or a date brunch or a date breakfast or something with Jesus. And this is something that you can do on your own time. But every Thursday of each week, starting this week, so every Thursday on the website, I'm going to be posting like a little journal, exercise, devotional type thing that you can do during your date time with Jesus. So that way you'll have something that you can do that you can kind of take with, and it'll be something that we're all going to be doing that week. So you can come back to the website and you can share, whatever you've got from it or what God spoke to you. So those are some of the things that we have going on for this coming year, starting tomorrow. So that's today. So let's just close with a word of prayer, and then we'll go from there. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, Lord. Thank you for each and every woman that is here. Heavenly Father, thank you for their contributions, God, to today's discussion, Lord. I thank you for their hearts. I thank you, God, just for their desire to grow closer to you, Lord. And I thank you, God, that throughout this week, throughout the coming days, Heavenly Father, that you would just press upon their hearts the need to spend time with you, God. I thank you, God, that you would begin to show them how much they mean to you and how much you want to spend time with them, God. I thank you, Lord, that you would create for them, Lord, opportunities where they can just be with you uninterrupted, just quality time, Father and daughter, Lord. I thank you that you would pour out to them and pour into them and bless them and encourage them more than you've ever done before, Lord. I thank you that you would continue to strengthen them, God, in every area of their life, that they would be strengthened to be the mothers, the wives, the daughters, the sisters, the friends, the teachers, the employees, the bosses, Lord, that you have called them to be. I thank you for this day, Lord. I thank you that you would give them all safe travels as they make their way from this place. In Jesus' name,